Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. Today we're joined by Christoph Klöper, who is CEO of Basel Area of Business and Innovation, one of the world's most concentrated biotech hubs. And Christoph has a unique perspective on biotech ecosystems. He actually wrote his doctorate on the structure and geography of innovation processes in biotech right here at the University of Basel. And under his leadership, Basel has grown to be one of Europe's most dynamic life science superclusters, home to over 800 companies and 33,000 professionals. Christoph, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you, Luke. So thank you for having me in your podcast. Thank you for the kind introduction. Maybe one caveat. I mean, this cluster has for sure grown also without my input. I think we have contributed for sure, but I mean, this cluster has such a long history. So we might have added a bit to the growth and to the attractivity, but I think the real secret sauce lies in its history, its past, and its dynamics.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, Basel does have an incredible history, which we could come on to. But before we do that, it'd be good to start a bit about you and your journey. So how did you end up in Basel in the first place, and what made you stay there?
Good question. I think it's a journey that many academics at least have seen. I did study in different places in Germany and in the US. And then I searched for the right place to do my PhDs, being interested in innovation processes, a certain interest already in biotech, and then a chance opened up to do the PhDs here in Basel. So I moved to Basel, of course, with a plan to stay then for 3 years, maybe 4 years, finishing the PhDs and then move on. And actually, it was hard to move on because the city is so interesting. There's so many opportunities job-wise, but then also the quality of life was quite nice. Then my wife also moved to Basel. That's another factor. And so in the end, we got stuck here in a positive way, right? For a while, I still mentioned, in 2 years time, we might search for something else, move on. And it never materialized because there were always opportunities again to stay. And I don't regret it. I'm quite happy to be here in Basel.
This is a fantastic city. We were there 2 months ago. We ran an event, External Manufacturing Leaders in Basel, and it was still summer then. And so we saw people floating down the Rhine with their clothes in bags. I've never seen that before. It was incredible.
Yeah, that's very special. And it's really part of the quality of life. I mean, summers in Basel are really about enjoying nature, enjoying the Rhine, but also enjoying the mountains, which are not far away, and maybe also enjoy the internationality in the sense that basically the city is in 3 countries, right? I mean, the city center for sure is in Switzerland, but you do have suburbs in France and Germany, so you could pick your bar in France and maybe have a restaurant in Germany afterwards. That I believe contributes a bit to the quality of life here.
And you can come out of the airport and turn left for France or right for Switzerland.
A big source for confusion and in the end finding people after they exited the wrong exit. Yes.
So let's talk then about this supercluster concept, which Basel is now recognized as I mentioned, you've got a lot of companies, 800 of them, 33,000 people who are working in life sciences. Talk us through how Basel got there, I guess, from the early days in the 1870s, I suppose, in terms of silk production and chemicals, through to where it is now.
I mean, it really started early, like for many clustered probably in the pharmaceutical and chemical industry. As you said, it was really textile industry. It was also a trading hub. And interestingly, it was also a hub for innovators from Europe to go there because it was always quite open to innovation. And I think this combination in the beginning, having a textile industry needing dye stuff, having innovators sometimes coming from different countries, many from Germany and France, then coming to Basel and starting innovating in the field of then dye stuff, or meaning chemicals, right? And still a very, very dirty industry. So one of the key location factors was also the Rhine, right? Today we swim in the Rhine. Back then it was more sewage, right, for this industry. So it was a location factor for these chemical factories back then. But over time, I mean, the chemical industry turned into the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceutical industry then, over the last century or the end of the last century, turned also towards biotech. You had companies really going only into pharma companies. We saw this consolidation in globally, I would believe, but I think a nice or interesting example is the company Novartis, right? It used to be 2 chemical pharmaceutical giants, Sandoz and Ciba-Geigy. And then in the late 1990s, they restructured, right? Novartis was in the pharmaceutical parts, and Genta turned out to be the agroscience part, still also headquartered here in Basel. And the chemical part went into different companies, right? Clariant is one of them, and BASF, or the
Mm.
Basel subsidiary, is another one. So then we had this cluster of large companies, so chemical, agroscience, and strongest in pharmaceutical. And I think what we then saw over the last 20 years, that besides or in between the campuses and the towers of these large companies, you saw suddenly an entrepreneurial move, right? As you saw so many startups. First, it was more spin-offs out of the large companies. I think a very notable example was a company Actelion that in the end was bought up by J&J for 30 billion, I believe, bringing then also J&J into this cluster.
Mhm.
But you saw suddenly many of the smaller startups. Some were able to exit, of course. Some failed. Some are still around, turned themselves into successful pharma companies. And then at some point, you also saw the internationals coming, right? A classical evolution, right? It turned into an ecosystem that became attractive also for global companies to be part of that ecosystem.
Hmm. How would you compare Basel to other biotechs, whether that's globally
Mm.
or within Europe? I mean, when you're looking to attract talent, when you're looking to attract biotechs to consider establishing their operations in Basel, what's the elevator pitch, I suppose, for how you compare
Mm.
Basel to other regions?
I mean, first looking at Europe, I would say that Basel is the most advanced ecosystem in biotech in Europe, at least in continental Europe. We of course acknowledge that also the Golden Triangle around London is also attractive. But then it's also basically it's not one cluster, right? It's basically three
Hmm.
clusters. In Basel, you have all the quality and quantity of these three clusters, Oxford, Cambridge, and London, in one, right? So I would say it's the most advanced. It also, it's really different to other European clusters in Germany and France, mainly in the sense that Switzerland tends to be a bit more American in
Okay.
terms of economic policy. So the state keeps normally a bit out of what companies is doing. Labor law is very friendly to companies. Taxation is relatively low. So it's a bit more American mindset in that sense. So I think it's also quite easy for external companies to understand the environment here. And of course, we understand Europe can be very complex for external companies. So I think their Basel and Switzerland in general is an easy entry point. And now, if you compare globally, of course, we also look to Boston. For me, I would say Boston is a very advanced cluster. For us, it also is sometimes a benchmark of where
Hmm.
we want to be. Um, but I think in some instances, I think we are catching up to Boston, right? So, and it's always good, of course, to have a benchmark and see what's going right and what's going wrong there.
What would you say Boston has done right over the years to create those conditions for success?
I mean, the academic quality in Boston, which I think is a starting point also of building this cluster in biotech. I mean, that's outstanding, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's this concentration of very good universities with an entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, that is fantastic. In that sense, Basel is also different, right? We are not coming only from this academic environment. Basel comes actually more from this industry environment of having Roche
Mm.
and Novartis here and the other companies. And we do have academic excellence, but maybe that is not as pronounced as in Boston. So the strengths here would be more on the business side, actually.
Mm.
And in having the entire value chain here in the pharmaceutical industry from R&D, which you would also have in Boston, but then you also have the company headquarters here, and you would also have the production sites here. So I think that is an advantage. Now, what can we learn from Boston? I think all these parts of translating technologies from the university or academic sphere into the entrepreneurial sphere, I think there we can learn, and we have learned quite a lot from the US in general and from Boston in particular.
Very interesting. On the academic side, I think it's about 1,000 research groups who are active now in the Basel area. How is that landscape developing?
Growing, right? But it's interestingly growing with the industry landscape. So it was not first the academic landscape and then the industry came, but the industry had the history you mentioned earlier. Um, it's growing. I mean, in the past, there's a local university which ranks very well. It's the University of Basel, actually also the oldest university in Switzerland, which per se probably is not as relevant to a company, but it's also a very good university and focused on life sciences. So it focused with the development of the industry on life sciences. And in addition, we are quite happy that now the academic landscape is also broader. So the National University, or one of those in Switzerland, the ETH Zurich, also opened the life sciences lighthouse department now in Basel. That's a very nice addition, we have to say, with a great entrepreneurial drive also in this institute. Of course, we have also the applied side of the research environment with an applied university here in Basel, also focused very much on life sciences. And there have been now many institutes, many of them privately funded, coming from the Friedrich Mirscher Institute, which is connected to Novartis. We have a new institute called the Roche Institute of Human Biology. Okay. So, of course, Roche also needed an institute. And I think a quite notable example is the new Botnar Institute for Immune Engineering, which has now got an endowment of 1 billion from the Botnar Foundation to build a new institute here in Basel, focusing on immune engineering and with a mission to bring the best researchers globally into one building here in Basel.
On the investment point, are you seeing any changes this year? Because, so much investment right now is going into the United States, particularly with the tariffs now being slapped on anyone who isn't investing in the US yourself. Are you seeing there being any change in terms of inward investment because of that, because everything's going across the Atlantic? From my position sat in London, there's obviously a lot of investment which is coming out of the UK and seems to be reinvested into the US. What's your experience?
Well, we see all the promises to invest now in the US. Of course, they have to be done, and for sure they are connected to the policies in the US. For sure, they are also connected to the market attractivity in the US, which it's important that this remains in the US, and it is connected, of course, to the price level. So there we will see what will happen in the future. What we see on the investment side, we still see that the interest stays extremely high. Mm-hmm. It's a bit harder than in previous year to turn interest into a decision to then really invest, which I can understand, right? I mean, times are relatively uncertain currently. We see that at the regarding tariff levels, so we feel there's a lot of changes coming, and in that situation, companies are a bit more reluctant to invest. So yes, we see a bit less actual investment. We are quite optimistic that the level of interest and requests we get is constant. What we also see is a bit of shift, right? I think from the European side, we feel the strongest reluctance currently to really invest and to decide. And from the Asian side, again, we feel rather growing interest and more decisions coming to Basel. Maybe also a bit connected to the global situation, right, with US and China.
How about venture funding? I mean, generally, Europe always feels like it's a lot slower, particularly when you think about San Francisco, Boston, or indeed China. How are you finding the whole VC space? And is there anything that you can do in your capacity as Basel to support that?
I obviously agree with you that Europe is a bit behind to the US. I mean, that's one of the points for sure we can also always learn to improve a bit. I mean, I feel that Switzerland, in comparison at least to continental Europe, we are again okay-ish, right? It's not on the level of Germany or France, but I think we see a much higher level of investment into companies, maybe a bit comparable to the UK, I would say. So that's already good. But of course, there's quite some room to improve. So what do we try to do? Or maybe first, where do I see us currently? I think we have improved over the last years. I see also we imported a lot of the good ideas again from the US. So it's many people who are active in venture funding. And even some of the funds are actually Americans or American funds who are active. So that's a good thing, I would say. So we do get a bit of knowledge transfer from the US here, and also American money being invested. I think Versant, for instance, as a fund would be a good example. We do a lot of investment here in Switzerland, basically an American fund. But But per se, we also need to become better. What can we do? We as Basel Area Business and Innovation, we run an early stage incubator called Base Launch. There, our deal is we try to bring early projects to an A round because we believe that is the phase where we lose a lot, right? Because funding is so hard in Europe for the seed and pre-seed phases. And there we can help a bit with money, but also with a lot of contacts and a lot of connections we can make. And we have been quite successful. So I think it's around 1 billion that has now been invested into the 28 projects we have incubated there. So there we feel we can do a bit by working to avoid this valley of death in the early stages
Mm.
of company development.
So Base Launch, is that a physical place where people come together? Or how does it work?
So basically, Base Launch is an incubator. It's not physical. It has access to physical spaces and different
Hmm.
technology parks. One of them is also operated by us, but there are also different parks in the Basel area because we felt that in the end it's important to have labs and to have physical spaces, but probably it's not the main issue we have. The main issue is really to have good projects and match them with early stage fund. And that is basically what Base Launch is doing. So we are searching and we are open to hear from interesting projects from all over the world. But actually, we believe continental Europe is probably the normal environment where we can make an attractive offer.
Mm.
So we try to work with these scientists with extraordinary science and turn then these science projects into companies. And then we try to help to build these companies. And these companies need to be also in Basel. And I think normally it's also good for them to be in Basel because the talent base is good and the access to funding is good. But they can also keep, for instance, research labs at their home university, for instance. And then we try to bring this company to a level where it can raise an A round. We try also
Hmm.
to make the contacts. We are always on the side of the company, so we try to advise them in which direction they could go. And then as soon as they raise an A round, then I think our job is done. Of course, we still talk to the people. We're still open if they have questions to us, but normally these companies are then quite independent, right?
Mm. Over the years, it's not just obviously the main pharma companies who are operating here. Over the years, as outsourcing and the contract manufacturing side of things has become more and more of an industry trend, you've got some incredibly well-established companies there, from the likes of Lonza and Bachem to Corden Pharma, Salonic, Primapus, recently 1023 Health as well. What's driving this concentration of CDMOs there? Is it the history of facilities which used to be run by the pharma companies? How's it come to be?
I think it's a mix again, like many answers sometimes are a bit different parts of an answer, right? I mean, here I think history has a part, right? I mean, a company like Lonza, I mean, it has been in Basel for a very long time, right? Actually, it has its history in the valley, in a valley in the Alps, right, where they used the energy of the Lonza River that gave the company its name to
Oh.
produce energy, and then work with it. Um, so that's an old thing. So and Lonza had its quarters in Basel for a long time. So that's history and probably the luck of history we had, right? And I think for many of the others, I think in the end it's a cluster effect, right? So you have companies here, these companies need the services of these CDMOs, or they do have people in their teams that in the end would like to have their own company. And in the end, Bachem was founded by a person who was already active in the cluster, same as actually true for 1023, right? With Hans
Mm.
Christian Mahler coming from Lonza. So then suddenly you have these cluster effects of having companies who create a demand for the services, but you also have people with an entrepreneurial mindset establishing the next company. And I think in the end, this creates this environment. And there have been, of course, also the occasions where CDMOs took over facilities of the large pharma companies, but actually not that many, right? I know of Lonza taking over parts of a Novartis plant, and of course we have Primopus also with a Novartis plant. But I think for all the other activities like Bachem or Lonza, the other Lonza plants, I think that's more the cluster effect, right? Being part of
Mm.
this cluster brings business, brings people, brings investment, brings creation of companies.
I suppose, and it helps the richness of your ecosystem that you've got these specialists in different sides of research, development, and manufacturing all together.
Absolutely. I think that's the argument of this complete value chain here in this cluster. So you have everything up to production, could be production of the large ones, but could be production in these CDMOs.
Great. Christoph, what do you foresee as the future for the region? Obviously, with geopolitical events being what they are, it can be quite hard to forecast too far into the future. But if we were to have this conversation in 5 years' time, say, what would you have liked to have happen? Are there particular plans or trends that you're seeing which you think are going to come to fruition?
I believe that this regional supercluster will further go into this direction of an ecosystem. So I believe that players around the two large ones here, I think they will further gain in significance. So we see further more players joining the region. I think this will go on actually because it's attractive to be here. You have access to the talent base. You have access to the funding base. What we see is a lot of investment currently going into the real estate space, where many real estate developers build now facilities for many tenants. So it's not only the buildings that Roche and Novartis are building, but it's multi-tenant building that's quite important in an ecosystem that you have like the opportunity to also rent smaller lab spaces, for instance. So that development, I believe, will go on. It's probably also a global trend. For sure, we will see changes in how drugs are developed, right? It's for sure that it will become more digital. We also see more and more companies here in this field. I think this institute of the ETH Zurich here in Basel could be a lighthouse really. There we see many companies are really at the interface of digital technologies and lab work. So I think there we will see a change that also will bring change to drug development and the infrastructures we will need to that. I hope we are very good prepared for that, but it's also hard to foresee in what direction it will go. I do believe that the region is becoming more attractive for Asian players. So we see a lot of interest for them to be connected to the global players. And I think this now shows also in investments in the Basel area. So there, I think we will see a bit of a change of more Asians, maybe Europeans and Americans stay at the same level. This would be my view of the future. But of course, I mean, currently everything changes so quickly, so we have to stay agile, I believe. Yeah,
absolutely. Christoph, thank you for your time today. It's been great speaking to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Luke. It was a great interview.